yes, uh, our previous class was basically, kind of looking at Python data structure. We learned a lot about how Python handles data and kind of like how we use that and kind of like why we even need to understand um, those data structure and why we need them. So we learned about lists, we learned about dictionaries. We also learned about tuples. Yeah. So today we are gonna make things a little bit more interesting by exploring how we can actually use Python to access web data. And it all comes together because main reason why we learned most of the things we've learned so far, especially the last things that we learned around data structure is, kind of to prepare us for this, right? So Python typically is a, friendly beginner stuff programming language that you can use. But from this point onwards, you kind of begin to see the power of Python. That, Python is actually a very much more or less a universal language, programming language that can use to do so many things, right? So today we'll be able to see how we could, actually use Python to interact with the outside world and, kind of like an example task or project. Looking at the, let me actually just make a new file. Just kind of like this.py. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is something called JSON. Um, so JSON is kind of like a programming language, not really like a programming language, but it's more or less kind of like another way that we could handle data, especially in Python, but it's not specific to Python. We have seen specific Python data structure stuff, so like your variables, those are really like Python specific stuff. There are variables in other languages, yes. There are probably lists and dictionaries in other languages, but each language handles them in their own unique way. So when we look at like different data structures, we have different way that we could pass data into each programming languages. That's the data structure. So Python has the lists. Python has the dictionaries. It has the tuples. It has the strings. Um, but it gets a little bit interesting, because when you start interacting with the outside world, you can't really tell what's behind the other technologies that you are kind of interacting with, right? So it's kind of like a universal format. There becomes a need for kind of like a universal format that can be used across different programming languages, so that if you're building a program, probably like a software, or you're writing a simple script, and you're going to be interacting with some web API, you're you don't have to worry so much about what language the other softwares that you're interacting with, the other systems that you're interacting with, the other network endpoints and API endpoint. You don't really care. what language, whether it's a application built with PHP or JavaScript, or C++, or whatever programming language, we needed a way to make sure that the data is standardized so that we don't have to deal with so much stuff, right? So that's why we have something like JSON today. So JSON is basically short for um, JavaScript object notation. So it was invented by this guy. All right, guys, do help me admit people. It really helps. There are some of you that always help me to do that, and I really appreciate when you guys do that. So just help me keep an eye on the lobby. You know, if anybody is trying to get in, just let them in. It makes things a whole lot easier for me, right? Okay, so you know, the JSON, like I said, it's short for JavaScript object notation. Um, it was basically created by some guy named Douglas Crockford, and it is basically was kind of made from JavaScript, and it's kind of like, hey, JavaScript was already kind of like a programming language that deals with a lot of web data. So it kind of had already a pattern to do that. So this guy basically noticed the pattern and he defined it, standardized it, and gave it a name and registered the domain name just json.org, and it basically took off. A lot of the API thing that is happening, probably like 80% or more of all the APIs that is happening in the internet are probably probably using JSON to do that. So that's why it's kind of important that we touch it. But don't think about this as like some other programming languages, programming language that we are getting into. It's just kind of like really just a way to handle data. So what it does is it makes it easier for us to kind of understand the data, and it serializes it, which means it kind of does some things to make it easier for the for it to kind of pass across networking systems and structure it in a way that it can be formatted properly and stored and transmitted, across different systems, and then makes, have a lot of support for several programming languages, so that whatever programming language you're using to write your software, it's easy for you to just pass it and reconstruct it, or just use the data to do whatever you need to do. We are going to get into some worked examples, but just before we do that, I'm going to show you, how we actually do the JSON stuff in data in Python. But first of all, let me actually show you what a JSON code looks like. So let me say we've got this. Let me call the JSON file. Yeah, let me call this a JSON file. And for JSON files, it's usually .json. So you'll notice that right now this is a whole different file extension. Why? Because this is an independent. This is very this file is independent of Python. Assuming we're not just using Python in our program, and we'll probably have like some other programming languages, it's still gonna be valid, right? So a JSON file will probably look something like this, right? It usually has this broad level braces, and the VS Code, usually makes it easy for you to kind of navigate around by putting all this section that really helps. But there is not really much going on in the JSON file. It basically has information, data. That's it, right? So this is just an example. So this guy named Chuck, uh, it's supposed to have some email address, and then but it has a hide. Yes, makes some sense to me, I guess. And then there is a phone number for the guy. He has a type, he has a number. It just basic stuff. But merely looking at this, you know, okay, this is probably like personal information. Could be profile information. Could be like this guy registered on some website or filled some form online or whatever. But ultimately, the information became organized in this way, and now we can definitely import this file into our Python program and make use of it, kind of like access it. You'll notice one of the closest Python data type or data structure that looks like this is probably the dictionaries, kind of like a key value thing, right? Where you have a key and then you can assign values to them so that in your program, when you reference this file and you ask for name, it gives you chalk, right? You ask for email. Uh, Probably there are other people that has emails, and this guy decided to hide his email. So when you get hide as yes, then you probably know, okay, this person doesn't want to disclose their email. That kind of thing. You could really use this information to do so many things in a software program, right? It has phone number, so you might actually just say, phone at number, and then you get the person's phone number, and you can also reference the type, and you get what kind of number they have. A local that could be like probably like two types. Probably like a local one might not have the country extension, right? So that's kind of like how the JSON thing works, and that's really all of it, right? If you're dealing with a whole lot more data, it could run into several lines, of JSON lines. And then at that point, you just kind of view being able to kind of study the data and figure out how to access each one of them, right? So it's easy for us to use these across different programs so that everybody already knows that, hey, okay, this is how we are passing data across the internet. So everybody just, tries to format their data like this so that when you receive it, you can make sense of it. You can use it. You can write your own program to be able to pass it and automate stuff, and it wouldn't fail, right? Because there is a consistency in the way that we are passing data around on the internet, right? So that's basically what JSON is. Now, mind you, JSON is not the only way. Like I said, it's probably covering like probably like around 80% of the whole API transport and happening on the internet. But there are others, right? There is another one called XML. There are probably like some tons of other ones that didn't really become quite popular, but probably have their own unique use cases. But it's kind of more like use your own unique use case based thing, right? But there could be there could be some scenarios where you're working on some project and you need to use a different kind of a serialization um, language to handle your data, right? So that could happen. Just so you know, JSON is not the only way that we do this, but it's definitely the most popular one. Yeah. So right now we've kind of understood what a JSON file looks like. If we wanted to use this data, we could do something like this. We use we have a kind of like a module in Python that handles the JSON stuff, so we can always import it using import JSON. It will probably look like almost the same thing across other languages as well. You probably need to, some languages might not even maybe need you to import any module, and then you could just use them like JavaScript, I think. But mostly there is a module, it's called JSON. It's a built-in something that comes with Python. So it kind of allows you to handle JSON so that we could do something like this. We could define a variable and then use the JSON module that we imported to kind of load the file, right? So in this case, this is going to be our JSON file, I believe. All right, let's make sure that works. I think I can just clear this and run this file. This should be test.py. Okay. All right, so we are definitely not doing this right. We probably need to get the file first of all. Let me see how we can get the file into the application first of all. All right, okay, looks like we could probably like open it. This would be our JSON file, the JSON, and we're making sure that we can read it. All right, so we don't need this guy anymore. This becomes our data. And then we should be able to print it to the console at this point. Yeah, I guess that's basic enough. Okay. All right, that worked. So basically, we have our JSON file. Typically you might not really, like maybe have a file per se. Sometimes it's just like calling some API, but we'll get to that point. What we are doing is, we're just getting the built-in module so that we could load the JSON file. It kind of handles the the whole formatting stuff and makes it easier for Python to understand the JSON file. And then we can just print what is inside the file. We have successfully used a JSON file in our Python programming, and we probably could be able to kind of start accessing some of the individual stuff in there. I guess we could probably do something like this will be our data at name. This will be our data at name. All right, let's see what that does. All right, if I run this, we get chalk and we get yes. So at this point, we have started, kind of getting into the file. At the point when Python loads this file, it serializes it, and then we can access it. We can access individual keys, just using using the block braces. And if you reference individual keys, it's basically just brings the value for you, right? You'll notice a little bit that in this situation where we have email and we have something else, something else inside it, it's just being able to reference the first layer and then the second layer, and then you'll be able to get the result, right? Yeah. So this is basically how we handle JSON files. And then there are some JSON files that might look a little bit different than this. Probably like we have like very, very simple file. We'll call them lists. Okay, let me just get rid of this. So we call them lists in JSON. It looks just a little bit different from the regular JSON, because it has this block braces instead, right? But inside it, you can now have a list of stuff. Like on this line is basically, an ID that has a bunch of. It's basically like a line that has a bunch of uh, key value pairs, right? So in this scenario, we can put the whole thing inside the curly brace and it just becomes a list, right? So this kind of JSON, it's usually very it looks it's I think it's most popular in kind of like structuring the header of different API calls, and it kind of helps you to kind of pass in values a lot. That's where I've personally seen it used a lot, but it's not very helpful when you are trying to kind of like structure data the way these guys helps you. But if you look, you'll notice that it's basically kind of like you could put this whole thing inside a block bracket, and then the individual list inside it, it becomes still kind of like just having these braces inside it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just kind of like a, a way to kind of flatten the layers a little bit so that it could be more simplified. So when you have your data formatted like this, you would expect, it's just going to be a list of items inside it. So this is called JSON lists. Sometimes you could, get some JSON data and they could look like this. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. But if you want to access the information that are inside the list, it's basically the same thing. We could do something like print name. We'll do something like print name and we'll do something like print name. Okay, data at name, say data at ID. We don't have nothing here, so I'm just gonna get rid of this guy and I'm gonna get rid of this guy. And if we run this now, okay, we get some errors. So list indices must be integers or slides, not string. Okay, this is a problem inside our file. Printing data name, that did not work. Okay, but can we print the data? I think we should be able to do that. Okay, we're able to do that. Oh, okay. So for us to actually like access the items inside the list, we kind of need to loop over them. So when we print the whole thing, it just gives you everything that inside the list. Yeah, looks like we need to handle this just a little bit differently from the regular JSON files. But it just looks like we kind of need to loop through them. Let me see if that works actually. Yeah, it does work. So for the lists items, you kind of have to loop through them to access the individual items that are inside it. Yep. So that's just a little bit different. I think that's really all about it in JSON. We just have the regular JSON on the lists. Sometimes they are kind of together, in the same file. You could have a JSON file that has this list inside it, or you could have lists that that is kind of a little bit more complicated. But I guess the whole idea about lists is that you need to kind of iterate over them or loop through them before you can access the individual items, right? Okay, so in programming, the whole reason why we needed to understand this is actually because of something called service-oriented programming or service-oriented architecture. Something like this, right? Service-oriented architecture. So right now, majority of the softwares that are available on the internet are using this architecture. But before this, softwares were really just independent programs that are running and relying on themselves to carry out all the tasks that they do. I mean, if you were on the internet like several years ago, when it was just like simple web pages and blogs, that you could just go search some information. Those systems, they had everything that they need. They basically just relied on themselves. It's some source code written in some programming language that probably like accessing some database, and then getting information back from users, and and storing them back in the database, right? But at some point, someone figured out that, hey, we could do a lot more if we can allow different systems, right, or different softwares that are running independently to kind of work together and share resources and kind of split responsibilities as well, so that today we have things like, let's say, for instance, you go to a website for or to kind of, okay, let's say you go to an airline's website today, and you go to book a flight, something like that. You will probably see most of them today. They offer hotel bookings, probably like car rentals and stuff like that as well on the website, right? So, but the reality is that the airline is most likely not running hotel services, right? The chances that an airline will also own hotels is very, very slim. But what usually happens is that the airline, they have their own service. They've built the software for it. It's running somewhere, in some server. But then they are using, because of this service oriented architecture, they have built their software in a way that it can actually interact with other systems, other softwares, and other services that belong to other people. For instance, uh, another people that has hotel services, and then they are able to integrate that service into their own program, into their own system, so that when you book your hotel, they are basically just taking all that information that you filled in on their website, and then sending it to this other system, and then getting some feedback back to you. So you don't you no longer need to book your flight differently and then go to a separate place to kind of book your hotel reservation. So that's kind of like what that's the whole idea behind service oriented architecture, so that instead of building one single application that does everything, we can actually kind of delegate those tasks to smaller services that can even belong to separate organizations, and just have a way for everything to kind of just work together, so that if you need this, my software may not have it, but it knows where to get it. It knows how to get it, so it's able to just go talk to some other software somewhere that probably doesn't even belong to our organization, and get the information you need for you, or get the tasks you need done for you, or whatever it is. As in the case of booking your flight, and also like booking your handling the hotel bookings in the same place, right? So that's kind of like the whole idea behind object or service oriented architecture. And the catch means that we use something called APIs to make it work. So an API is basically the major thing that links all these services together, right? So an API would often require you to, because typically you need some kind of identity, like the hotel people, even though it's a separate system, that needs a way to kind of identify everyone or every software that is trying to access it, to get the service that it has. So we have something called API keys that we use to identify ourselves when we are accessing these APIs, right? You have these APIs at the very basic level, it's just some URL endpoints that you go to, and then you put in your key as per to identify yourself, and then it brings back the data that you have. Um, a very simple way that we could probably do this is to look at an example, to look at a work example. Let me see. See what we can do here. All right, so there is something called geocoding. Um, it's kind of like a way that we can build applications that use maps, right? So I have a sample application right here that does the exact same thing, but it's probably a little bit more complex, but we have kind of gone through all of this. So I'm actually going to give it a shot, because this is gonna help me explain everything that, show you everything that I've just done. So geolocation is kind of like the way Google Maps work, right? Every place on the earth already has something called a longitude and a latitude, and people cannot remember these numbers. So we use addresses, to kind of, identify um, those points that are important to us, like our houses, our offices, restaurants, places that we want to visit. So we give them a name so that we could remember them. But that's on the technical side. We are still using this longitude and latitude to actually identify places. So here is just a simple application that let's run it so that you see what it does, right? Um, I'm gonna clear this. I'm gonna run this guy Python new.py. So what this application does is I can put in I can search for addresses, and then it just tells me more about the location. It kind of like the way that you go to Google Map, and then maybe you want to find where you want to find a specific location that you're heading to, and then you type in some words, and then Google Map goes ahead and find places that match, and then brings them out, right? And then you can now like pick the particular place that you're going, and it can kind of take you there, right? So, but this is a way more simplified version. What it does is just two things, right? The first one is forward geocode. Fancy word, but this simply means that you can type in some words, and then it goes to get more information about the place, including the coordinates. The coordinates is just the longitude and the latitude, and it kind of gives you more information about the place, right? And the second thing it does is like the opposite, right? Assuming what you have is coordinates, like the longitude and the latitude, then it goes and it gets you the name, the actual address, right? So that's what this application that I'm using as example does. And then how you use it is when you run it for the first time, it asks you, it lets you know these are all the features that I have. Do you want to do the first one, or do you want to do the second one, or do you want to exit? right? So if I pick the first one, then it asks me for an address, right? I could put it anywhere, let's just say something like New York, which is too broad, I think. But if I do that, it goes it it first of all, what it does is accesses this API. This is an API, right? This API belongs to geocode.maps.co. So this is a service that is already built to provide this service so that I don't have to build it from scratch anymore. And then I can now build my own application just by making my own application to be able to call this API, pass in the relevant information, and then get back the results. And then all the things that we've learned today are all coming into play here, because first of all, we have to access an API endpoint. We have to pass in our API key to it at this point. And this is all for testing. This is all just, testing stuff. API keys are actually sensitive information that people could use to, people that have, malicious intent could use this to do a lot of damage, right? So when you start playing with this, definitely keep your API keys safe. At this point, we don't really care, because this is just, for the class, and you could probably use my own, but I'm going to show you how you could make yours as well. So we'll get to that point. Right now, we're just trying to understand how this application works. So we have accessed this API, we gave it all the information that we need, including the search query. And you will notice that the search query that I typed in here in New York has been concatenated into a string. So it becomes a search query, kind of like the way you search things in Google, right? So this API endpoint needs a search query. We gave it to him. It needs an API key. We gave that as well. Then it brings back a location for us, New York, telling us, more information about this place. Is in the United States. It lies at longitude that and longitude this. And this is enough for me to actually build, say, a mobile app. I could now maybe get the person who is asking, who is searching for this information, get your own location as well, and kind of direct you, build something that, gives you some direction, or maybe provide information around schools in the area, if it's an application for students, kind of provide information around, say, if you're looking for hotels or accommodations or restaurants and stuff like that. Like, there are so many things you could do from here onwards just by getting this information, just by having just by like calling this service, that provide this API for us that we could use, right? In reality, there are some costs, right? Because when you start accessing APIs, a lot of them will give you, some free package that you can use. But if you start building like a full application that, thousands of users are using, imagine people making this request every second. How many people are doing it? Think about an app like Google Map, for instance. How many people are searching for places on Google Map every time, right? So it becomes a lot of pressure on the system that is receiving these API calls, right? So they put some price to it. So typically you will need to make an account, have your own API key to, and if you're doing a little bit more than the free the free package that are required, you probably need to pay. But that's when you start building some applications that does some actual stuff, right? Yeah. So, but you kind of get how it works. I can continue searching for places. Let's say Lekki Phase 1, which is close to me. If I search for this place, okay, invalid choice. I have to kind of pick what I'm doing first. I have to pick one, and then I can search for another place. Let's say Lekki Phase 1. And then it just goes around and it searches and it gets me it gives me more the full address of the location, lets me know where it is, and this is the coordinates, right? And then when I'm done, I can exit. Okay, that's 3. And then I can exit, right? So let's look at the code that is doing this. So the first thing that we're doing here is we're just importing a bunch of modules and libraries that would help us. We've already seen this guy. Why do we need it here? Because obviously the information that the geocode.co is giving us, geocode.maps.co is giving us, it's going to be in JSON. So we're going to be passing all this information to him in JSON, and it's going to send back the results in JSON as well, so that there is a kind of consistency there. Other people who are building the application in with JavaScript and PHP and whatnot, they are also receiving this information in JSON, and they're also sending it in JSON. So that's the catch there, right? There is something called SSL. These are certificates that helps websites to kind of let the users know that, hey, we are secured. All the information that you're sending back and forth is encrypted. So there is no person that can key into the middle and kind of intercept your information. That's what SSL is. And these other things are just, kind of like things that we use. The request is what, helps us to make HTTP requests. This is a very rich library in Python that has all those information though. So we're also getting the pass, which allow us to, kind of understand, access the information that we're getting back, right? So in this scenario, we are disabling SSL requirements because we don't want to go through all the hassle of, trying to install the certificates and all of that stuff. Normally, if you're visiting a website and it's not secured, and there your computer is just going to set off an alarm, hey, this is not secured, go back, and you will probably already have this experience with some websites, where when you try to visit them, it tells you, hey, this is not secured, go back, right? That's SSL. That's what it does. So everything I'm doing here is just to make sure that, to let him know that it's okay. We're just testing out stuff. We don't really care about the security at this point, right? And then these are all the information that the API is asking us for. There is a need for the API key. Like I said, this is a sensitive information. And then there are the API endpoints. So in this scenario, we are just using 2 of the available API endpoints, which is the forward one and the reverse one. The forward one, like we saw, is the one that, you could give it some words, some address, and it brings back the coordinates. But the reverse is just like the opposite, right? It takes the coordinates and then it brings you results. It brings you the address, right? And then we are, making some little functions that handle each one of these, right? So we have one of our functions is handling the forward geocode, and the other one is handling the reverse. And then we have a main function that uses these other 2 functions to do the things that we want, right? Basically, so and do that. No, yeah, basically. So this is where we are doing the forward geocoding. This is where we're doing the reverse. You could get into this a little bit more to kind of understand what's going on here, but I guess I probably should make this code available in our the tags page that we are kind of using right now for the tags, and I'll provide more information about this tags, that will allow you to do it. But basically, this is just how it works. So this function, it takes these parameters, address and API key, and you'll notice that this parameter is in JSON. So this is where we are using our JSON to pass this information, and we are putting together the full URL at this point using the forward URL, which is this guy, and we are putting all the necessary parameters together to construct the full URL so that we could now start querying the API, right? So at this point, this is where we were printing the full URL earlier, and then we are using our error catching to make sure that even if this API request fail, we get to catch the error, and then handle the error more gracefully, right? So we are doing a bunch of things here. I'm not gonna get into it, just for the sake of time, but basically, we're just using all that data, and then we are making a request to the endpoint, and then we are getting back whatever the results are, and we're using them. And then sometimes we don't get a result, and then we are handling it correctly to give you a more descriptive information instead of throwing up an error to let you know that, hey, we got no result. So sometimes you can access an API and you don't get any result. It's technology. Sometimes it's not working. Sometimes there is too much load on their end, and you're not getting your own request processed. So you might write your code in such a way that it tries again, multiple times, right? So that's typically how we handle it. And from the results we're getting, we're just assessing the latitude, the longitude, and we are printing them out so that there is a lot more information that this request is actually bringing forward, right? And just so you see what it's doing, I can actually print the whole thing here. All right, let me try it. Let me print JS at this point so that you see the whole thing. I think it's the pie. So if I do the first one and I put in, let me just say Lakey. So we'll get to see there is a whole lot more information that this guy is bringing out. I can actually copy this whole data. I think this is where it ended. I can actually copy this whole data and put it in my JSON file. Um, okay, there is probably need for a little bit more formatting to actually make this work. But if you look at the data, you notice that it's basically a list. It's returning a list, just like the example that I gave you earlier, right? So it's basically returning a list, that has all this information that we need inside it. It has place ID, license, data, a whole bunch of information inside this. And look at the ones that we are picking. We are picking the latitude. We are picking the longitude as well, and we are picking the display name, right? So it has a lot more information: class, place type, town. The type is town, is a town, is a place, and all of these other information. You might have probably know you're writing your own, and you just your application is just checking if a place, any location we put in, whether it's a city or a town, you already know that this this API will return that information for you. So building such an app, it's usually like as simple as just making the call and then fetching this type this type value, key value, that it returns, and then you build an app that people can use to find out that kind of information, right? All right. So, oh shit, this guy's been on the lobby for how long? Sorry, buddy. So sorry. So I did this by just printing the whole thing, but we don't really wanna. We don't really want the whole thing. That's why I'm not printing the whole thing. So I'm just accessing the specific data that I need. Like I showed you, the latitude, the longitude, and the display name. Those are just what we're getting from here, right? It works the same thing. It's just basically the same thing with the reverse. Just it gets the reverse instead. Um, and then I'm just doing a lot of printing stuff here to make sure that it looks good. So all this information that we're getting and the inputs that we're getting from here, and then we're just using that inputs. If you choose one, we're just using that to get more information from you and basically achieve this. And then at the end of the day, if you put in an invalid code, an invalid input, it lets you know that you probably need to try again, right? So this is an example of an actual application that is using an API. Everything we are doing here is using this guy. Let me show you this. Let me share something different. Yeah. So everything we are doing is we are using this website. This is the geocoding website. You can access it with URL. And if I log out right now, there is a separate page. But basically, what you need to do is to make an account, and then once you make your own account, you get an API key, and then with this API key, it gives you about 5,000 requests a day. So that's pretty much generous, but if you need much more than that, that's where the website actually starts to make money. So, but the whole point is that this whole website, is giving you this specific service so that you can build your own application without needing to worry about any of this. And then you just need their API to get all the service that they offer, so that your own application can work. Users who use your own application, they don't get to see any of this, They just put in the location they're looking for, and boom, they get the results. And then they're thinking, you're doing the whole thing, but you're actually just using the service-oriented programming or architecture, where you build your own service. And then the other things that you don't want to worry too much about, you're using some other service to solve that problem. right? Yeah, so I'm gonna log out now. I'm gonna delete my account immediately after this, so that because I mean I'm just sharing all the whole information out there, but just so it's there's no confusing part, right? When you get to the website the first time, there's a whole lot of information. It it gives you a whole lot more information, even about the plants and everything, and it goes ahead to show you how to use it. So you notice this is exactly the URL endpoint, the API endpoint that we were using just now. You get your search query. How's your search query? You can put in your the search query that you put in. It just basically concatenates all of them into a string, and then it uses the API, your own API key, to make the request, and then it brings back your result. And it's very simple stuff, right? Using JSON and APIs, we've been able to build the internet basically, right? So that's how a lot of the programs that you interact with on a daily basis work. And as usual, I'll encourage you to actually, try to build something at this point. I'm going to put in more project examples on the site that I shared the other day, and I'm going to share that again. But just if you're following the classes up to this point, you can build stuff, right? You can now build stuff. You can actually, even think out some of things, some of some of your own scenarios, and try to achieve them at this point. Um, from here onwards, we're just gonna get into more advanced stuff, and eventually create be able to use not just Python, but even like JavaScript and some framework to create full functional applications. But at this point, you're no longer a newbie, I guess. So congratulations. All right, guys, that's really all the things that I have for you today. This class been going on for I was hoping this would be under an hour, but okay. Well, thank you guys for showing up today. So far, so good. Do you have any questions whatsoever about any of the things that we already talked about? Any questions? No questions. All righty. All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna let you guys go. And it's thanks again for showing up today. Enjoy the rest of your day and bye.
Thank you so
You're welcome.